Welcome to Operations Management course. Today we'll be focusing on process mapping, where we'll talk about the Gemba walk, and we'll also talk about lean principles, and just in general how, Gemba walk is going to help us with, so is one of the key tools when it comes to management decisions. So Gemba comes from the original Japanese term Gembutsu. That means a real thing or refers to the real place. This term is adopted to describe where the work is happening and a personal observation of work. And so lean is a production method and a management method. As a management method, lean principles help leaders gain valuable insight into the flow of value within the organization by visiting the workplace and interacting with employees. Leaders also learn new ways to support their employees. This approach encourages collaboration between employees and their leaders. In the context of manufacturing and production processes, lean helps leaders develop continuous improvement processes and to improve their operational efficiency. Lean manufacturing ideals and tactics encourage identifying and brainstorming ways to drive better and better results. However, disconnected leaders that dictate procedure and policy risk actually hurts performance more than it helps. Therefore, regular visits to the shop floor can help keep them connected and have a sense of ownership of the team. Now, Gemba is where the real work takes place. Now, a Gemba walk provides company leaders with a unique opportunity to step out of their ivory tower and see the real work, as well as building trusting relationships with other workers. So we could say that the Gemba walk bridges theory and practice by bringing leaders to the shop floor to observe processes as they happen. And the result is the definition of Gemba walk. Now let's discuss what exactly is involved with a Gemba walk. And so there are three components to the Gemba walk. The first is seeing the work in action. So Gemba walks are designed to encourage managers and leaders to, at all levels, to walk around the place of work and find wasteful activities. The second component is listening and discovery. Now, the main goal of Gemba walks is to investigate the value stream with an in-depth analysis, where they identify the problems through active communication. Good leaders are always open to listening, not talking. The third part of it is respecting people. Now, the purpose of Gemba walk is to uncover problems, better known as opportunities. So the employees need to feel safe. You don't need to point fingers or blame people. You're not there to review and judge the results. You're there to work as a team to solve problems together. Focus on the weakness of the process rather than looking at the team members as the source of the problem. So regular Gemba walks ensure managers observe their shop floor's operational reality. Gemba walks highlight how processes on the floor differ from the written standard operating procedures. Now, with that focus, the exercise can generate ideas on how to innovate these processes. Now, once again, the warning here, this isn't meant to be a corrective exercise. Instead, it should encourage the observer to seek an understanding of why practice differs from what is written in the documents. So participants should focus on how the actual process is either delivering or subtracting value. While touring that shop floor, Gemba participants gain additional context into their standard operating procedures. Then leaders can apply their insight towards improving the conditions or the tools or even the procedures that were observed as being detrimental to the overall production. Leaders are more considerate of their decisions' impact when the managers and the operators both experience the shop floor. So, beyond just highlighting trends and data insights, actual live observation helps to align the manager's perception with the reality. Perception is a combination of what someone hears, sees, and thinks. And that's where Gemba comes into the reality. So, what happens when decision makers don't see what is happening on the shop floor? Now, that's a good question. They rely on secondhand information. Sometimes this is from people that are not even connected with the shop floor. So, if a factory is failing to meet targets, leaders who do not complete Gemba walks may assume the worst of their team. This rumination or a focused attention on the symptoms of one's distress and on its possible causes and consequences, as opposed to solutions, hurts the team's morale and performance. So, in this example, imagine the true cause of missed targets may be due to faulty materials, old machinery, or negative Gemba conditions, which then causes the leader or the top manager to give harsh feedback to the employee's work ethic, and that definitely is not the way to fix problems. So, what exactly happens on a Gemba walk? One thing to note is that Gemba walk isn't just like taking a tour through Disney World where you're aimlessly looking around at the processes. It's actually a very structured walk with some key questions that you have to be asking yourself. So things like given the structure and the goals of Gemba, the walk that helps to avoid introducing excess subjectivity. This is the difference between a structured and an unstructured observation. Gemba observers need to know a process's target result and the official procedure. They'll get information about the official procedure from the standard operating procedures manual. But this helps guide their observation and avoid distractions. With the information, the observer can see what is happening on that shop floor in a very specific process context. Then they can identify opportunities for waste reduction. So when you're going through that, you'll go with a list of questions that will guide you in what you should be looking for during that Gemba walk. Questions like, how clean and free from clutter is a work environment? Are there items in the workplace that aren't needed? This applies to both virtual and physical environments. Do employees have to shift through tons of information to find what they're looking for? Are people performing standardized work, or are they just doing random tasks? Are there many people moving around but not producing much? So Gemba recommends to avoid unnecessary walking, unnecessary meetings, and unnecessary reports. Are there potential dangers in the workplace? Are there many hours wasted in the process? What amount of time do people spend just waiting for things to happen? For the previous steps to be completed, or maybe even for tasks to be approved. Talk to workers, be curious, and find out what is their motivation. What are the problems which may not seem obvious to the casual observer? Sometimes you just need to ask. Are there designated areas? Are there knowledge-based situations? Is it possible to have easy access to information for workers? Are they able to find out where or who to ask for help? Is the worker who is waiting for machines or is it that the machines are waiting for workers? It's fine if you have workers who are waiting for the machine, but it should never be allowed. So Gemba ideology says that you should make access to powerful tools and fast access essential to your work so that it's easier to attract employees to your company. Now, you're not done once you finish doing the Gemba. So, after the Gemba walk, before you take any actions based on your observations, you'll need time to organize your thoughts and notes. Feedback is important, but early feedback may be devastating. Why? Because you need to sit down with the leadership team and carefully analyze the situation. You may even consider inviting some of the workers you observed. For example, the ones who gave you the most insightful information. Use all of the data that you have collected as part of your continuous improvement process, which is also known as the Gemba Kaizen Circle. So, the Gemba Kaizen Circle is the meeting that's held after each Gemba walk that will include a few participants from different departments within the company. The main purpose of this Gemba Kaizen Circle is to have as many different points of view as possible so that you can make the best informed decision, a decision that will actually bring improvement. It's important to go around the shop floor and collect insightful information about what needs improvement. However, what matters the most is to go back where you started. So, a post Gemba walk is then used to close that loop, show respect for the people that have been observed. This will make it much easier to lead successful Gemba walks in the future. So, the Gemba walk is a great tool to ensure that management is connected to the significant issues in the company and isn't trying to solve issues from sitting in a chair in a remote place, disconnected from what's happening with the operational floor. The Gemba walk can help increase visibility of continuous improvement and lean. It can help get buy-in from the employees and have them support daily progress towards improvement and waste removal from the value stream. So the benefits overall from Gemba walks is that you'll create stable relationships with the people who do the work and add value. Secondly, you will identify problems quickly and take action to improve your performance. And lastly, and most importantly, employee engagement will be enhanced by the clear communication of goals and objectives. Now, the Gemba walk can also be done through various frameworks. And so we're going to talk about 4 key frameworks. There's the 6M framework, 8 ways, design thinking, and also the 5 whys. So with the 6 M's, we're talking about machines, right? The first M is machines. So when we talk about machines, we're referring to equipment, computers, tools, devices, databases, servers, software, and hardware that are needed to do the job. The M for methods would be processes and procedures, work instructions, even references or drawings and that will indicate what to do in a case that there's a disaster, laws and regulation, and any other documentation that will impact the process. The third would be materials. So when we're talking about materials, we're looking at supplies, tools, resources, chemicals, vendors, and other items that are provided to the process as inputs into the process, and they generally come from outside of the organization. Now, measurements. So this framework is going to help you figure out where you need to focus during that Gemba walk. So with measurements, you will be looking at how does the data quality and accuracy impact the process? And assuming that there could be bias, maybe you're even looking for sources of missing, non-random, or skewed data that hides the true issues in the process. And of course, the next M would be Mother Nature. You'd have to think about how the work area or that natural environment would impact the process. Some natural environment, things like noise, temperature, humidity, wind, and air quality. And lastly, manpower. So if you're looking at for manpower, you'll be watching the people who do the work, the ways in which they can contribute to the problem or issue that is not due in other categories. But you should assume that people are trying to do a good job and not intentionally trying to make mistakes and errors. Other times, people are used in the source of manpower to remove gender implication. Now, the other framework, which is going to help you identify sources of waste, would be the eight wastes. So, the transport waste is defined as any material movement that doesn't directly support immediate production. So, for example, having poor production planning or improper facility layout. You could also have poor scheduling that could generate transport waste. And another example would be a poor workplace organization, which results in unnecessary additional material transport. So, for example, there have been case studies where they have studied transport waste as it relates to patient wait times. They found that sometimes patients don't seek out help because the wait times are so long that they end up, neglecting their own healthcare concerns. So as a result, if you wanted to find the transport waste, then you would create a flow map. And then through that flow map, and you would do a Gemba walk, and you would walk and see what exactly are the procedures when a patient comes to as part of their intake into the hospital. And then you would follow the patient's journey and see why is it that it takes so long for the patient to enter into the hospital and as well as to leave for a regular appointment. Now, inventory waste is another type where we're talking about having excess supply for process requirements that are in excess to produce goods or services in a just-in-time manner. Now, the reason why you would have inventory waste could be because you're not doing a good job forecasting, or you have inefficient processes, or your suppliers are not getting things to the inventory on time, having long changeover times, even unbalanced production processes, or just having a poor inventory management software that's just not handling tracking to the accuracy that's desired. Now, motion waste is defined as the movement of people that doesn't add value to that product. So examples would be moving equipment, maybe reaching or bending or gathering tools more than necessary, and as well as unnecessarily complicated procedures. So you're looking at how the workspace of each worker is laid out that could be giving them time to walk away from their work, which adds time that's lost. So motion waste is often caused by ineffective plant layouts, lack of visual controls, poor process documentation, or poor workplace organization. So there have been studies done where, in the same token, the motion waste could be that the pharmacy for the hospital is located in a different building. And so workers have to go and pick up the medication from another building and then bring it to the patient. And that would be a waste of time. Whereas if they had the pharmacy within the same building, then they could refer the patient to go themselves, pick up the medication, and exit. And you could reassign that time that's being used by hospital workers, so seeing another patient. That would be an example. Now, waiting waste refers to any idle time that occurs when there's codependent events that aren't fully synchronized. So examples of waste could be, operators just sitting around waiting for equipment production to end, or if there's a bottleneck between the process steps, or even production that's waiting for operators to show up, unplanned equipment downtime. So waiting can be caused by inconsistent work methods, not having the proper equipment or materials, having a long setup time, or just not having enough machines in the same ratio as the number of people, or you have people, but then you don't have enough machines. So then that means there's going to be, waiting, because each person is going to have to take their turn to use that machine to make the product. So an example would be if you're at a pharmacy, you'll notice that most pharmacies will have only 3 registers, right? But the number of workers, there would be 10 of them. And in front of them, they'll have 50 patients. But just imagine if you, instead of having 3 registers, that each of those pharmacists had access to a computer and a register then they could check out more patients and reduce the pileup of patients waiting to get their medication. So that's an example of waste from waiting. Now, overproduction is another type of waste. So we're talking overproduction is where you're producing more than what's needed. And so that would be, or you're producing things faster than needed, or you're producing things way before it's needed. So if we're talking about perishable goods, if we produce, bananas, for example, in excess, and then we try to stockpile it, well, we're wasting it because it's a perishable good. Or maybe we're collecting blood from patients, and then we have an overload of those and we can't freeze all of them. And so then all that blood gets wasted. So the form of waste is most commonly seen in a push system supply chain. And so and so automation can also go wrong in places. So if you have everything automated, then maybe the machines are producing way more than what the customer demand is. Or if there's a lack of communication, or there's low uptimes or poor planning, or a just-in-time reward system can cause overproduction waste. And of course, there's overprocessing is another type of waste. Refers to having this redundancy in the production effort or redundancy in the communication that doesn't add value. And so overprocessing waste could be, for example, would be endless product or process refinement. And so if you're spending so much time refining a product, that is going to that leads to more mistakes, or if there's excessive information, or there's redundant reviews and approvals. So if you're constantly having to have a team review things in excess, that also would mean that the product is not going to make it to the market because you're spending way too much time testing it. Or there's unclear customer specifications. Now, some of the reasons for overprocessing waste would be that you have excessive decision making at inappropriate levels, or maybe you have policies and procedures that are inefficient. Or lastly, it could be because the customer input concerning the requirements are not very clear, or if you have poor configuration control, or you're not very consistent with enforcing quality standards. Now, defect waste is defined as a loss of value to do the scrap, repair, or rework of a product that ends up deviating from specifications. So excess variation in production processes, high inventory levels, even inadequate tools or equipment, incompatible processes. Maybe your workers aren't trained properly, or even if there's damage during the transport of goods, or there's a poor layout or even unnecessary handling of products that leads to quality defect waste. And then the last one is if you have unutilized talent. So the waste of unutilized talent means that you're engaging employees in a process task which they are not the best at, where they could have been reassigned to another part of the product process, and that would have been their key strength. So employees performing unnecessary work when their talent could be utilized in activities that would add greater value, or not utilizing employees' critical thinking abilities and not asking for their feedback in that process. So another type, but most commonly an underutilized talent would be when employees work in silos, because when employees work in silos, that prevents them from sharing their knowledge. So eliminating these 8 wastes from the manufacturing value stream is the core of lean manufacturing. Lean manufacturers should focus on building processes that make these wastes obvious so they can be addressed and improvements can be made immediately. Now, let's consider, Gemba walk in the context of design thinking. Now, we have talked about design thinking in previous modules. You could try applying design thinking approach to your Gemba walk. Design thinking is not completely a new concept to manufacturing. In fact, design thinking as a social technology is a blend of tools and insights applied to work processes. So, in the context of manufacturing, for applying design thinking to a problem, it would lead us to total quality management. Because some of the elements of a good Gemba walk are already inherent in the principles of design thinking. Structure guides people through a process. It gives them confidence that they're doing the right thing, and this can inspire ideas without a fear of failure. So, trying to combine lean and the design thinking framework could be done by structure and collecting data on the Gemba walk. You could consider using paper or digital tools. You could also encourage participants to seek to understand the operators that are participating in the process. Encourage those participants to brainstorm ways to help production achieve the performance target by optimizing the existing process. So you can develop even alternatives by maybe creating testing tests or prototypes with an update. And so prototypes are from the design thinking framework to see if the assumptions were correct before implementing changes. So leveraging this additional structure will definitely improve the likelihood that your Gemba walk will yield positive adjustments. Now, our last framework would be the 5 why analysis that could be added as part of your Gemba walk as well. So the 5 whys typically refers to that practice of asking 5 times why the failure has occurred in order for you to get to the root cause of that problem. So there can be more than one cause to a problem as well. And we'll show you an example soon. So in the organizational context, generally root cause analysis is carried out by a team that's related to the problem. It's not really any special technique that's required, and it doesn't take a lot of time as the other frameworks. So if you're crushed for time, then 5 whys would be the way to go. Now, what are the benefits of 5 whys? It helps us to identify the root cause of the problem. Also, you'll understand how one process can cause a chain of problems. And thirdly, the 5 whys framework helps us to determine the relationship between the root causes. And of course, it's highly effective without needing, some mathematical model that could be complex or time consuming. So let's look at how the 5 whys could show us how one process can lead to a chain of problems. So take a look at this example. So here we start off with the pipe freezing. So this is one problem within the process, right? Now, when we start asking the first 5 why did the pipe freeze? You would say, well, because there was not enough insulation between the pipe and the outside. Then why was there no insulation? So that's one problem that we found. The second problem that we found is when we asked that is the construction wasn't built to code. So why was the construction not built to code? Well, because there was building code violations. So why was the building code not was violated? Because they had a plumber who didn't follow procedures. He hadn't been trained. So that's a waste, remember? So underutilized. And so why did this untrained plumber violate the building code? Because he didn't follow procedures. Why did he not follow procedures? Because he had a boss, a general contractor, who himself was unqualified and did not know about these building codes. So as you see, that one problem in the process of a pipe leaking found us a whole chain of problems here. We found 5 problems. And we found that the root cause was having a general contractor who was not qualified. So how does Gemba connect with our main topic today, process mapping? That's a great question. The starting point for implementing lean actually begins with defining the current condition. And so to define the current condition and process improvements, you could use the PCDA framework, plan, do, check, and adjust framework. This framework provides the steps needed to understand the current condition. But now, after you've understood the current condition, you need a way to visually represent that current condition. That's where process map is used to document the entire process step by step, which allows us to see the relationships between the inputs and the outputs of a process, along with a clear identification of decision points and many other steps that are in that process series. So the process mapping is the tool that's going to visually capture the entire process. And Gemba, the process of the discoveries made during the Gemba walk. So the process is really what the process maps are used usually in the beginning of any Gemba walk or initiative to help us to understand the flow of the process. And it's going to be part of the support in every phase of the improvement project. Now, in general, process maps provide us with a visual display of the sequence of the steps within a process. They could also be used as a method of communication because you can share that map with the people who've been assigned to fix a certain problem within a process step. So, for example, if it's a pipe leak, you could send them the process map and share with the plumber, hey, this is where the leak is located. And so that's how it would be a communication tool. We all have been part of a project that goes around and around in circles, trying to remember and figure out what exactly happens in the process. So when we make those steps, steps in the process visible, it gets communicated to everyone in an understandable language. Because many times you're on projects with people from diverse backgrounds who may speak different languages. And so whereas something visual could be much easier communicated, and we all call it, even if we speak the same language, we might call something completely different. And so all those language differences would not get in the way. There are also times when you need to add steps here and there, but with a map being visual and near the area where the process occurs, that communication of that process will be conducted and defined more accurately. Another very common reason for using process maps is that a visual map could help us to analyze the whole business process. So some of the ways, so in summary, the ways that process maps can be used for analysis would be one, to identify parts of a process where errors occur, such as reworks of the flow. Secondly, if you want to establish measurement or data at various points in that process. Thirdly, to show the boundaries of where a process begins and ends, and also to share with how stakeholders are impacted at every step in the process. So, for example, the patients that come in, if you use a process map like a flow chart, you can follow their journey throughout the hospital and get an explanation of which provider or which part of their journey through the hospital ended up adding more time to their stay there. So it could be that it was the pharmacy that was taking too long. Then we need to follow up on the pharmacy. Or it could be registration because the patient was ignored for a long time before they even got the registration forms. So that's what I mean by stakeholders. And then the boundaries would be, for the whole process of a patient coming in through that door would be, filling out the paperwork, actually approaching and talking to the front desk. Are there, visual cues that help them to find out where the front desk is? And so are there arrows? These are some of the ways that we would analyze the process errors by using a process map. So how do you make these maps? So you have multiple choices of how to make these maps. And there are different types of maps as well. So that's what we'll talk about here. So there's obviously the SIPOC, which is going to give you more of what the process does and who's involved. And we've already given you an example of the flow chart, which is a general overview and it documents simple processes. You also have the swim lane. The swim lane is going to indicate who needs to do what in a process. Usually I would use a swim lane if when I already have a plan to roll out and I'm changing the way that a particular work is being done. So as you can see, the maps are made by initial observation through the Gemba, or it's also known as the process work. The customer value is the guide to the activities of the Gemba and also how you're going to prepare these process maps. So a process walk or a Gemba walk is informational, is like an informational tour of the area where the work is taking place. And a process walk is a series of structured on site interviews with representative process participants. And the goal of a process walk would be to gain a comprehensive understanding of the process. Interviews focus on details like process time, wait time, defect rates, root causes, and other information that can lead to targeted improvements. So Gemba is conducted through field observations while you're collecting data of metric values that are considered a measure of customer value. So the result of Gemba includes creating process maps, value stream maps, swim lane maps, or even a spaghetti chart. So, more quantitative process analysis and value analysis of the map preparation are formed after you've completed Gemba. In addition, the 5 whys analysis is conducted and a fishbone diagram is prepared to find the root cause of the problems found during the Gemba walk and process analysis, value analysis, and mapping. And altogether, the results of these processes will complete the steps in understanding the current condition within the company. So Gemba alignment looks for alignment between the process and the people by asking some key questions. So questions such as, are the processes designed consistently to achieve their intended purpose? Secondly, are people engaged and given the support to succeed in the work that's necessary to make that process successful? And lastly, you would conduct the 5 why analysis to determine the what, the how, the where to grasp the situation. And by asking why, it adds understanding of those potential root causes. Now, as you can see in my slide, there are many different types of process maps. For example, we've got the SIPOC and the value stream maps that are generally provide a deeper level of understanding as they identify information flows. Now, let's take a deeper dive into each one. Now, the value stream map provides more complete information on time and process performance, but it can't really overcome some of the complexities about decisions within these projects. Now, the swim lane describes the decision process that occurs amongst the functions of the organization. So when you make a value stream map, it's a good idea to create a swim lane map to complement that value stream map. Now, on the other hand, you've got spaghetti charts that give you a top view of the space layout. Now, I want to return back to swim lanes. So why are they called swim lane maps? It's because they have layers and they also have a sequence-wise presentation of the process. Here, we can figure out who does what. However, the drawback of a swim lane map is that it's so detailed that it can be huge and it can actually contain a lot of details in a very space-efficient visual way. Now, the different lanes are meant to represent the connections, the communication, and the transfer between different departments or different workers. By visualizing that process in this way, it becomes clear where it's still lacking in efficiency or where it's lacking in who is responsible for a certain task. So these types of process maps, we usually are able to detect gaps or issues or unnecessary steps to resolve that issue. And you could also work and decrease the lead time or the cycle time. And swim lanes diagrams are excellent in helping find where you need to cut short some of the process steps and also to help you determine which areas in the process where you could do without excess number of employees. So even sometimes the whole micro level process map shows in which area we need to focus. We can find the pain area are the pain points within that process and start the treatment of that particular area while also getting a visual of the whole area that's being impacted. So now let's look at value stream maps. Now, value stream mapping it has drawbacks. One of the drawbacks of the other process maps that I discussed with you is that it tends not to capture the elements such as information flow or or where the value stream map, whereas the value stream map has that advantage that it can capture both information flow and material flow. And you'll need to know both information and material flow when you're trying to possibly study batch production, for example. So value stream mapping is used to understand what is valuable to that process and what is a non-value added. So in our example, we'll be looking at materials and information flow. The greater amount of skill is really required in making a value stream because it contains an excess of information. But the value stream map has all the actions which bring the main flows and give the service to the customer. Usually, every process has three types of conditions. So conditions like what you have thought about the process, what exactly the process is, how that process should be. So the current state and also the desired future state, and how that process should remove unnecessary steps when you see non-value added steps in the value stream process map. So value stream mapping is actually a lean concept, and it's a tool that is very good for showing pull scheduling or any type of opportunity to do pull scheduling. It is used when we plan for process improvement, and it's also used when you're planning a lean implementation to display the current state of the process. And so current state of things like the material, the information flow, and any other information that's important for lean implementation. So that concludes our lecture for today. I hope that you found this helpful, and we will see you all next time.